Thank you. My name is Ron Mills. I'm professor of art and visual culture at Linfield College, where I teach painting, drawing, and capstone courses. I'd like to speak for a few minutes about the difference, some of the interesting differences, I think, between making art for the public versus studio fine art in the normal go to your studio, make what you like or inspires you kind of mode. Some of the things that fascinate me about this are some of the local sensitivities that are present when one encounters the stakeholders in any given public art project. That is, the people who are going to see it. Because the tendency is for the public to view a work of art produced by an artist functioning, as I've often done, as a document about them. And so there's a kind of investment that they want to make in what I do that requires a kind of sense of collaboration. And moreover, in the case of particularly mural projects and foreign ones, as I've frequently done, a sense of service to the community that is quite distinct from what you think of when you go to your studio and are inspired by this or that and pursue something that responds to contemporary art history or is in line with your prior work. While I can't escape who I am, what I can do is use my intelligence and my sensitivity socially to engage the public and stay responsive to the particular stakeholders in what their needs and aspirations are for any given project. I have produced 7 major mural projects in 3 countries, having to do with a variety of subjects, ranging from the history of the encounter or the conquest between Europe and the Americas here at Linfield College, this mural, done for didactic reasons in the Spanish language classroom, where the charge was to produce a mural that would be provocative and foment conversation between students about the history of the Spanish-speaking world. And so I pursued that, one wall having to do with Iberian history, the other side having to do with pre-Hispanic, pre-conquest cultures, and then in the corner, I think I can go here, something about the conquest itself, this clash of cultures. This provoked interesting conversation even with the Spanish professors, most of whom are from Mexico and are mestizo in their own being. And so one of the conversations was, well, be careful how you portray the Spanish as these kinds of, brutes coming in and sort of wiping out indigenous culture because, well, that's half of my family, as are the indigenous people. You're talking about both parts of my family here. So be careful. And so while I wanted to be true to history, and I believe I was in the end, nevertheless, that kind of underscored for me the sense that, more is at stake here than my expressive potential. This is about a community. This is about work that needs to be something that can provoke thought, but moreover is not offensive in some way, or propaganda for a position I may be holding. And so as I've developed this work, more and more comments came in about what the needs were for the Spanish classroom, but moreover, what some of the sensitivities were that I wasn't particularly aware of prior to doing this project. The second mural is in Cuernavaca, Mexico at the State University of Morelos and has to do with the theme of Quetzalcoatl, the Lord of the near and the far, the Lord of wisdom, which is the emblem of the university there, but moreover, it's deeply, deeply embedded in local archaeology and local indigenous populations. And so I had as the stakeholders in this case academics, a middle class who likes to think of themselves as Aztec or in some sense indigenous, and then the truly indigenous people who have very, very distinct views about all of this. My challenge here was in not being presumptuous in thinking I could speak for everyone, but rather to avoid some of the political pitfalls that were very present, a North American painting a mural in the land of muralists about an intrinsically Mexican theme. You can see this was pretty dangerous, right? So I approached it in terms of poetics and psychology. What is it here that's intrinsically human? What is it here that I can deal with and interpret in a way that could speak to others beyond myself or Mexicans? They like that. because it expanded the meaning of this deep myth for them and let it speak more universally. And so that was the winning formula in this case. Nevertheless, the particular sensitivities and the academics and their knowledge of ancient history and the indigenous people with their concerns kept this project very, very collaborative. And indeed, I taught a seminar and invited various scholars to come in and speak to my students while I was then in parallel doing the mural. And so this project was particularly challenging, both intellectually and socially, as well as artistically. It's about a four-month painting. A project that I recently completed the fall of 2010 was at the School of the Integrated Arts in Santa Ana, Costa Rica, where the school is dedicated to the integration of music, art, dance, and theater, and the plastic arts. And so I proposed and started a project, the first panel of which is 50 feet tall. 3 subsequent panels are about 28 feet tall, having to do with these themes. In process, I was meeting with artists and the professors and teachers and some of the local people about what their concerns and interests are. Now, I'm a Fulbrighter, and I've done research work with indigenous populations for 25 years there, so I have a good grasp of indigenous history and some of the symbology. Now, in this context, a kind of ferocity of imagery was thoroughly acceptable. The very same imagery would get me in trouble were I trying to do this in the United States. And so by paying attention to the local mythology and the local mentality, I was able to, in effect, get away with a broader kind of psychological expressive range there in Latin America, where art tends to be a bit more ferocious in general, and a good deal more figurative. And so I produced this image having to do with the transformation of the individual through expressivity. But here again, in this image, you can see this clash of the ferocity of the baruka, the play of the little devils, with this much more benign imagery of maternality and a nascent kind of fetal figure was kind of troublesome to people on a committee at OSU, where I'd recently started a project, and I had to convince them that no, this wasn't something intrinsic to my art. It was in response to a particular concern in a different mural, in a different setting. I recently won a commission to do a very large new mural project in 3 parts at Oregon State University in Corvallis for the Hallie Ford Center for Healthy Children and Families. I'm most of the way through this project, and I'll give you a little bit of a preview. The work will be installed probably in mid-August or so, 2011, having to do with this theme. My proposal was to do the 3 panels. One panel having to do with relationships. What is it that is in our ancestral relationships? What is it with our interpersonal relationships? What is it about our children, our families, our parents, and the sense of figures, in effect, supporting one another? And this was my original proposal slide, and then this is what I've actually produced for them. A good deal different, though some of the basic features are there. They were very interested in these murals having to do with the natural world and the way in which the forest and the landscape of Oregon plays in and supports the social realm. And so this idea of a relationship needed to be, in my terms, embedded in the environment, in the natural environment. So as I was thinking about this, other sensitivities started to come up. This is a research center for healthy children and families, populated by sociologists, anthropologists, early childhood development people, and so forth. One could not talk about family in the kind of standard nuclear sense without running across some sensitivities. And so the issue came up very early in the project: how specific do I want to make figures? Do I want to make them sort of tied to the here and now by their dress and their features? Do I want to make them multiracial? Do I want to make them portray families as always father, mother, child? How do I want to deal with the social diversity of our culture and our society in a way that's not offensive to the stakeholders, but is nevertheless responsive to the overall theme of the building and this research center. And so my answer was to embed the figures in a rather vague way and also kind of cellularize them in the way that I like to paint, but nevertheless to have the figures present, though rather ghosty, and embedded in the environment in a way that kind of underscores the temporality of our own existence, whereas the landscape is more permanent. This was a formula that the committee liked and has been acted on. The second panel has to do with individual development, from sort of a fetal relationship to the mother-child, which I thought was the most irreducible component here. And this was the final panel here. This went through many, many iterations, including some phases that certain members of the committee thought were a bit dark psychologically, some sort of little nascent fetal figures that appeared a little bit alien, as they actually do biologically, but nevertheless it was a little troublesome to some of the people in the committee. And so the final solution was to substitute salmon, and to have salmon kind of flying through this very fanciful, almost William Blake-like image, because salmon are, of course, a quintessential symbol of spiritual health and sustenance in the Pacific Northwest. And this project, of course, funded by the Hallie Ford Foundation, timber money, by the way, it was very invested in the natural environment and was very interested in these values being present in the mural. I also liked it a lot, and I've painted fish a lot in the past, and so this was an easy solution for me. And I was very pleased with the way it kind of tied together some of the flow in the mural. The final panel has to do with community. It's the largest panel, about 24 feet wide, and has to do with community writ large. This was the original sketch for it, very, very sketchy, as you might surmise. This is the panel as of yesterday. It lacks more foliage, more figures, much more development, though the atmospherics are present. In this case, I'm able to do this piece in my studio rather than in situ or on the site, because the nature of the building and the construction project enables me to do it on canvas, stretch it, and then mount it on the site a bit later. This is a great luxury for me as an artist of public work, that I can actually do it in my studio space, however large, rather than being up on scaffolding all the time or in a public setting. Though that's fascinating too. Sometimes when I've done mural works, I'll have visitors come by day to day to ask, to look and see how things are going. And one of my favorite stories is in Costa Rica at a different mural that I haven't showed you. The lady who would clean the lobby where I was working would come by with her broom, and she would sweep by and she would say in Spanish, esta parte no me gusta. This part I don't like, please change it. So I'd like, well, okay. So I'd make some modifications, and then she was smiling the next day. Or the woman that runs the little coffee shop around the corner would say, esta parte, no. And so and she would say, you've got to make this right, or I'm not going to serve you coffee. And so guess what? The mural changed. So this kind of interaction I really love, because it's so very different from what a studio artist does in their solitude, in their studio space, looking merely inward. But this kind of interaction between the inward and the outward and the social and the individual is something that motivates me a great deal as an artist. Thank you.